Welcome to Your Strata Property, the podcast for property owners looking for reliable, accurate, and bite-sized information from an experienced and authoritative source.
Hello and welcome. I'm Amanda Farmer and I have with me today Reena Van Aalst from Strata Central. Welcome, Reena.
Hi, Amanda. How are you?
I am great. Powering through the list of Strata challenges as usual. That's what we're here today to talk about, as we like to do every few weeks, our wins and our challenges. What's been challenging you this week, Reena?
Well, this is a very sort of mundane thing, I think, for someone to probably be talking about in a public forum, Amanda. But I suppose we've always worked with people, whether it's in our offices and workplaces or whether it's in a professional capacity when you're dealing with clients. But I have many clients that they're lovely people, but they're very disorganized. And so you send out an agenda or you send out drafts. They can't find the draft agenda. You got to resend it. Where's that document? Where's the financials? Oh, here it is. I've already sent it to you last week. Here's a calendar invite. Oh, when did you send that? And I know the reason I'm raising this now, I think, because people are so busy in Strata at the moment, and I think it's just a time where there's so much upheaval. These things normally, as part of the normal course of work. But I think even if you're an employee in a job and then you had a boss that kept on sort of asking you, can you please send me this? Can you please send me that? Can you please do this? Can you please do that? After a while, it does become a bit wearing when people, just disorganized. And I know that some people, everyone has strengths and we all have weaknesses. But the thing is, it all comes down to cost as well, where people are complaining about, the cost of strata management fees and, value they get from managers. But when someone's being asked to do something over and over for either one or two people in a building or in a committee, it does get really hard, I think, because, of course you're not going to charge, but again, it's one more thing you have to do, one more thing, you got to locate the email. We have really good systems where we send an agenda, we have a separate section, we file that email so that it's in the buildings file for that meeting and it's easily accessible. We try and use our portal. But these sort of people, you never want to tell them, I'll go to the portal and get that document because it's definitely get an earful. And I think also the human thing about, people's intelligence, the average person has average intelligence, and that's fine. But when you're trying to deal with people on a scale in Strata that we're dealing with, I think sometimes what gets forgotten is the time that people take to do all those little mundane things that aren't evident. Like you go to a meeting, no one knows you've sent that agenda 3 times to someone, or you've sent the draft budget and you've changed this and you've done that and moved this and do this and change that. No one knows any of that, and that all takes time. And I think that, with managers and their portfolios and all the demands that are being put on them and the support teams to, get things done in certain statutory timeframes, agendas going out on certain dates. So again, we have to get things out at certain times to comply with the Act. So, I'm just sort of having a bit of I'm not sure if purge is the right word, but I think in this current environment where there's so many complaints about strata managers and their fees, I just would like to point out to those listening that there's so much that people don't see. It's like when you're watching a TV program, you don't really know, all the ins and outs of what, you see 2 minutes on a clip and you don't know behind the scenes how many people are involved just to produce a 2-minute clip.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely the case that some people are more organized than others. Some are better at email management than others. And I noticed this most of all when I'm serving on my own committee. And maybe it's because I'm a lawyer and I kind of have this logical, hierarchical way of thinking and maybe understand the importance of paper control. But I definitely feel that I have a better handle on the emails than my fellow committee members. And they have said that to me before. If we need to find something, Amanda will be the one to find it. And this example, Reena, of having to send things multiple times, having to follow up on instructions, committee members saying, oh, hang on, wasn't this decided? Didn't we already talk about this?
Yes.
That is very fresh in my mind because just this week in my own committee, there's been an email running around about, I think a resident had complained about something that was happening in their unit. We had talked about that at a committee meeting. There was an instruction issued to deal with that. The strata manager had some more communications with the tenant and then had followed up the committee with some instructions or seeking some instructions. And one of the committee members said, hang on a sec, didn't we already talk about this? And wasn't this what was supposed to happen? And that committee member, great that they were responsive and responding to the email, but if they had read back through the email trail and the chain of emails, they would have understood that, yes, the strata manager had actioned what was decided at the meeting. There'd been some more correspondence from the tenant with some more photographs. There had then been a request for instruction, should we send a contractor out? And that's kind of where it was at. And it was, I'm not going to say up to me, but sometimes I feel like if I don't do it, no one's going to do it, to revisit that trail, revisit the minutes of the committee meeting, go back over what was it that has happened in the last couple of weeks, and set that out in an email to everybody to say, yes, we did talk about this 2 weeks ago. Here's the chronology of what's happened since. Here's the additional information that our strata manager's given us, and here's the decision that needs to be made. That's something that maybe in another building, a strata manager might have to do to bring everybody up to speed. In my committee, I kind of tend to be that person who reminds everyone where we're at. But it absolutely comes down to some people have that skill of having that paper control and having that organization in their inbox, and others just don't or don't understand the importance of it. Of course, I'm always coming at this from the angle of we cannot be ignoring residents who are complaining about problems with the common property. We've got to deal with that promptly.
But I mean, that's a really great point that you raise about the fact that you have taken the time. Now, there's a cost to that time, and this is where I'm coming about. So therefore, when people say, you know, like if the manager's role is then to do that, and I agree in many of our cases that we do have to then come in and say, if there's no one else like yourself or other community members that are across things and also have the time to respond, then the manager is then responsible to then, and usually the manager will have it in the back of their mind because they're dealing with it on a constant basis versus a community member this is not their job. They just live there. So therefore sometimes they don't have the same, you know, like memory or ability to recount the historical aspects of a matter. But then the manager will have to charge for that, you know, and we're also being encouraged by companies and others to use like these sort of programs where people can, like a voting platform where you can sort of put, you know, comments in or ask the committee for an answer, and then everyone can say yes or no. But those platforms in this case would not work because, one, I think people, you know, have questions and they don't remember anyway, so they wouldn't vote, or they might vote no, so that, which is contrary to what you would want if they had all the facts. And secondly, some people aren't technologically able to deal with different types of programs, and therefore, you know, for someone like yourself who's, you know, and others who are more in that professional area where you work with programs and different types of apps, and that there's a lot of people perhaps don't have that ability to understand and use technology the same way that other people can. And so these are the challenges that I think also are causing strata management costs to rise, because as things are failing in buildings, as buildings are aging, obviously there's more money needed to fix them, but consequently there's also more money needed for people to be involved in the decision-making process and at that level to fix it as well, to deal with it. And so I think this is a thing that sort of, I think we need to sort of think more broadly about, you know, and this is why I think, I know there's been, which is another subject for another time, Amanda, about these fixed fees, but and having agreements so people can have, you know, surety. But, you know, in life, nothing is sure. Like, you know, today, you know, we had a building, everything was fine, and then next minute there was a lightning strike and now there's catastrophe, people had to move out. You know, that couldn't have been foreseen. And therefore, things like that can't be included. You can't include everything. Of course, there are unforeseen things, and you can't include everything in life in a very staged way in terms of an agreement or an arrangement, and that's why there has to be room for extra costs to be charged. But I think this is an example of what we're talking about, a very simple little thing where one little thing becomes so much more magnified because people either don't have the ability, don't have the memory, don't have the skill set. I mean, not everyone understands how things work in terms of strata living or buildings, just like I don't know how things would work for other professionals out there. I'm not, everyone really is more confined to their own areas of expertise. So, yeah, I think I'll raise that little.
So how about a line item in our strata management agreements, an additional service performing functions as the committee members' PA, EA,
Exactly.
You know, as an hourly rate.
Yeah.
There's an hourly rate for that one.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. You know, you're there organising them because they either can't organise themselves or don't have someone on their side to organise themselves. And as you say, there's a cost for that. It's either a cost on your side or it's a cost that you're happy to pay the strata manager to perform that service for you.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure there's many managers tuning in and committee members and owners who can relate to that. My challenge for this week relates to insurance, favourite topic of ours.
Oh, my gosh.
Question in my inbox from person who describes themselves as a long-time listener. This person's name is Scott. Thanks for reaching out, Scott. Scott is a strata manager and says that he has a building currently in dispute with their insurer about a request from the insurer to be provided with copies of all minutes from the last 5 years following a recent storm event that has led to a claim. Now, the committee doesn't want to provide the minutes, perhaps because there's some repair and maintenance issues that were never discussed or never dealt with. They don't want to provide the minutes. There is a loss adjuster involved for the insurer, and they are saying, well, I need these minutes to be able to progress the claim. Scott's wondering, has anyone else come across this before? Reena, have you come across this? What are the rights or obligations of an owners corporation in this case? Do they have to provide this kind of material to the insurer?
Yeah, well, I think it's part of the disclosure requirements under every insurance policy matter. And I've just had one where I think it's lightning struck. I was just mentioning to you that as a result of people having to relocate, the insurance assessors, there's been multiple, that's about 3 or 4 different areas of the insurance side that have appointed different brokers for different aspects of this claim. And they have wanted all the reports and all the minutes and agendas for the last 3 years. We had to prepare an index and, because there's so many documents. So it's quite normal, and that the insurance company would require this as part of the disclosure requirements to see whether or not things had been fixed when they should have been and how long this has been going on for. But I'm not really sure why obviously the Scott should be able to do a strata search and get the minutes, hopefully.
Yeah. So Scott is the strata manager. So Scott would be able to, put his hands on the minutes. I think the instruction from the committee is don't hand over the minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if there were no minutes. Maybe there's a strata committee meeting once a year after the AGM. But yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you there, Reena. The place to look for our strata managers is in the policy terms and checking what those disclosure obligations are, as Reena says. I imagine, I haven't looked at one of these policies for a while, but I imagine there are terms in there about the insurer being entitled to request that information, the insured being obliged to provide any information that the insurer may request in order to progress the claim, including documents like minutes of meetings and any other records that the insurer may believe are relevant to the claim. So if Scott's issue is with trying to tell the committee, hey, you've got a legal obligation to do this, then pointing to that relevant term in the policy is going to be the way to go about it.
That's exactly right, Amanda, because they also ask for quotes, reports that you've had. That it's more than just minutes. It depends on. And I've had times when I've had one, I remember many years ago, one of my large schemes where someone fell over in a building in the car park. They were injured, and the insurer even asked for any work health and safety reports that had been obtained.
There you go.
To see, obviously, if there'd been any reports of any risks that had not been yet identified. So, yeah, it's very common, and it's in every single policy wording, as you've advised earlier.
So just to be clear for anyone who's not familiar with these kinds of claims or this process, if there is a storm event and there is a leak, there's damage, the insurer, it's not just going to say, okay, fine, there was a storm, that's an insurable event, we're going to pay out. The insurer might be concerned to make sure that the owners corporation has been properly repairing and maintaining its common property, that the damage is a result of the storm and it's not a result of there being a pre-existing hole in the roof, for example. The insurer is not going to take responsibility for that. Insurers are getting tougher on buildings that are aging, buildings that are not performing that legal duty to repair and maintain. And so I'm not surprised that they may be asking questions that perhaps in previous years, if you're an experienced strata manager, you may not have had these kinds of questions from insurers. But now they're recognizing that sometimes a building is leaking not because of the storm.
Yeah, and I think also, Amanda, it's like one of those sort of user pay things. Why should buildings that don't spend money and don't maintain their assets subsidise those through insurance premiums that have been rising for partly because of this reason, where other buildings have been maintained and they have a storm and therefore, they should be paid out, whereas the ones that haven't been perhaps have partially contributed to the more extensive damage that's being suffered.
Yeah, exactly. That's a nice, neat one. Thank you very much, Scott, for raising that one. Listeners are always welcome to post comments on the website under each episode if you've got questions or suggestions for topics that you might like Reena and I to cover, or feel free to drop an email to amanda@yourstrataproperty.com.au. Reena, do you have a win for us this week?
This win is really a testimony to someone who's been injured at a site in a building that we managed a few weeks ago. There was a pit and the building had arranged for the old hot water tanks to be removed and relocated. And during that time, there was a plumber whose latch got caught onto a tap as he went to swing, and the actual hot tank sort of fell on him and broke his arm. Anyway, there was, obviously, we had the call. We were so worried and concerned. And I had a story from the chairperson who said something that was totally different to what happened. And it was like, I won't even repeat it now on air because it's really horrific to repeat.
Oh, right. You thought something like even worse
yeah, like
happened.
Basically that it was like so catastrophic that he basically probably would have been, not that he was dead, but he was probably close to it. And the amount of, because I think it was hot water and there was gas, I think the amount of like 14 police cars turned up and 5 ambulance. I mean, I could hear the sirens because it was not far from our office, and you hear sirens all the time, but then when you hear that, and so all of us in the office were so like shaken by what had happened. And anyway, now I end up speaking to the plumber, the owner of the who was there obviously at the same time and assisting, and it wasn't as terrible as what we had been thought to initially believe. And he's doing really well now, and he just broke his arm, and obviously he was unconscious for a few minutes, but and then of course the first thing at the community, you've got their insurances, and I was a bit sort of taken aback by that, but I understand why everyone's, after the shock wears off, people's mind goes to all the liability issues that could arise. And I think this is another area where I want to raise in terms of strata schemes paying for someone to do all the checking of contractors' licenses, insurances and policies, and when they expire, and whether a work safety method statement was required. So because, we just charge it a cost, we don't make any money out of this. We actually checked our system, everything was up to date, and it just obviously gave the Strata Committee and our office obviously peace of mind that, everything was kosher in that respect. But I think it's just one of those things where until something goes wrong, many times, as a manager, someone doesn't have their documents, and we get a warning in our system because people don't want to pay the company money to be on their register. Why should I pay as a contractor to be on the register? It's like, well, if we have to check your licenses and keep a record every year and check it and follow you up when you don't send it and follow up the insurance policies that have expired, that's going to cost you a lot more than I think the $95 that a company like eBix Trade Monitors charges. And so normally if someone hasn't had it, I've overridden it, and now I'm thinking, no, now I'm not going to override anything, because I know these people, like I've seen all the emails between eBix and Nets, and I know it's on the way, so I'm not sort of approving that shouldn't be approved. But it's one of those things where now it only takes an injury like this, and just like that recent case with the person that fell over with the gate, even though that wasn't to do with insurances, you just don't know when something could be catastrophic and result in death or permanent injury.
And it's these close calls that remind you of that. It was only yesterday that I was online with a group of strata managers teaching the module Introduction to Work Health and Safety for their CPD compliance for this year. And it's great that that topic is on the curriculum. And exactly what you're saying there, Reena, is what we teach, that you need to be checking for safe work method statements. You need to be checking licenses and insurances, even in residential buildings.
Yes.
Residential buildings, purely residential, WHS obligations strictly don't apply. They are exempt. But we still want to make sure that we're providing as safe an environment as possible for our contractors. And if there is something that could have been done to prevent an injury, a serious injury, or even a death, don't we, as an owners corporation, want to make sure that we've done that? And if the worst happens, to be able to, as you've done, go back and check your records and go, yep, they were licensed, they were insured, there was a safe work method statement. We did all of those things that we could do in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, on that topic where people have said that residential schemes are exempt, but I think that when it comes to an injury, like as I said, I had a scheme where someone had fallen over, that was residential. Now, the insurer asked for that report. Now, I believe that even though it's not necessarily required, you've got to mitigate the risk of the insurer. Now, how else are you going to mitigate the risk of the insurer if you don't know what the risks are by doing an assessment? I think a lot of buildings are concerned about, we don't want to do this report because then they'll find out what's wrong and then we'll have to spend money fixing it. It's like, but if something happens, if this accident had been as a result of a risk in that pit as opposed to the clip on his harness clipped to the tap as he moved. Now, if it hadn't been something like that and it was to do with something that was wrong in the pit and he had actually suffered more serious injury or worse still, death, then I'm not sure if the owners corporation can say, oh, well, we're exempt from these reports, and didn't have to sort of make sure that the
I mean, it really depends on, whether the owners corporation knew about that problem. Something like a slip and fall is a little easier to unpack because there's water on the floor. Everybody saw the water on the floor. The owners corporation, for example, was aware of a defect in the building that was causing water to pool in that area. There was a report about that. They didn't do anything about that. All of that, you're absolutely right, becomes relevant to the...
Yeah, although there's a hole in the ground and you can see it, like there's a little chunk of concrete that's come out of... Yeah, so that's obvious.
Exactly.
You haven't...
Whether you're residential or commercial, you're right. That is all a relevant consideration for your insurer. So I agree. And this is what I teach, and you'll hear about this when you're in Mudgee coming up soon, Reena, learning these CPD subjects for any building, residential, commercial, mixed. I believe our strata managers should be recommending safety reports and try not to call them workplace health and safety reports because that turns people off and they think, hang on, well, we're not a workplace. We don't employ anyone. We're not covered by WHS law. We don't need it. For all of the reasons we're talking about, it's an important document to have and to comply with, where that report identifies risks, minor, medium, high risks, to be having a program in place where you're addressing those risks, I think is important.
Yes. Thanks, Amanda.
Okay, to wrap up with what I'm calling a win for this week, some listeners may have heard me within the last couple of weeks talking about the new disclosure legislation that now applies to our strata managers in New South Wales. We've had some recent amendments to our Strata Schemes Management Act, most recently coming into effect at the beginning of February 2025, requiring our strata managers to disclose a few more things about their relationships with third parties, about the benefits they're receiving, any commissions or payments they're receiving. You might have heard me say that I think this is kind of just more of the same, and disclosure does not cure the problems that have been identified in the strata management industry over the last 12 months or so. Setting that aside, having a close look at some of these amendments, what I have noticed is that there is now a new requirement in the legislation, and it's not in the Strata Schemes Management Act. It's an amendment to the Property and Stock Agents Regulation, which does apply to our licensed strata managers. An agency agreement can no longer contain a provision that allows the agent to receive an insurance commission where the client, the owner's corporation, has arranged their own insurance, has arranged their own quotes, has done the work to get that insurance policy in place. Where that's happened, it is now illegal for an agent to have a clause in their contract that allows them to receive the commission anyway. I think that's a good change. I don't think it goes far enough, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But over the last couple of months, as you might have heard me say on the podcast recently, I've been looking at a lot of agency agreements, contracts between strata managers and their owners. And I have seen some of these weird clauses that say we are to receive an insurance commission, and even if we don't get that commission and you get the commission, then you've got to pay us the commission. I've heard from a few strata managers who would try to explain to me why that's fair and why they think they need to do that. On a pure reading of this new piece of legislation, that's no longer going to be possible. But I think the wording is a little bit too narrow. It specifically says that where the agent has not done the work of arranging the insurance, the agent can't receive the commission. That's fair enough. But what I think it could have said or should say to broaden that is that the agent also can't receive a payment that is equivalent to the commission or in the same amount as the commission that the agent was going to receive. I don't think that clause prevents an agent from getting an amount equivalent to the commission. It only prevents the agent from getting the actual commission. I know that there's more discussion that's going on in the industry with government, with industry associations to work out exactly what's happening with this commission problem, and the prospect of commissions being banned outright, I know, is still on the table. From my point of view, I think that's a good thing, because then we're not bending over backwards trying to draft our way out of unfairness, and instead we have a clear rule that all owners and all strata managers are aware of and can comply with.
So on that subject, Amanda, that you're referring to in terms of the insurance fee and remuneration, etc., I think, as I mentioned earlier, perhaps on a previous podcast, as how I understand it, I'm not sure if I'm correct, but the whole thing of insurance commissions was an income source to subsidise managing agents' fees. It was never actually, I know there's been all these reports about how many things an agent does and all that sort of stuff. And some schemes do take a lot more time to have their renewal because they've got a lot more problems, a lot more disclosures have to be made, a lot more reports have to be. But in the whole, I never ever in my history as being a strata manager ever understood that the reason we got a commission was because of our insurance work. That never was ever taught to me, or I never saw it ever occur in practice. And this is obviously these changes to the Act are now a result of that, saying that, well, if you don't do anything for it, how can you get it? Because you're saying that you're getting it because of this. But my understanding has never been that was the case. That's why I think there's a bit of a, I think, cross purposes that where we're at. I took over a building might have been 2 years ago, and it's a building in an area that I don't do much in. It's inner west, and it's a lovely, lovely area. And they came to me because they've heard about me, etc. Anyway, it's a small building. One owner, I think, owns about maybe 3/4 of the thing through different entities. Anyway, so we took over, and straight away I get this AMI renewal of the insurance policy. Now, we had quoted to receive an insurance commission because it was a small block, and that's what they had asked when we spoke to them. And I didn't ask them who you're with, whatever. Came Amy, renewed it. So I thought, I'm not going to worry about it. Second year, again, it comes, we say, do you want to use a broker? No, we don't want to use a broker. We just want to go through Amy. So anyway, okay, so they went through Amy. Then now they've realised that when it comes to a claim, Amy hasn't been performing in the way that they would have assumed. And some of the ancillary policies are not available through Amy, like the optional policies that owners corporations can take out that aren't mandatory. Mm-hmm. And they want to take them out because something has happened now since that time. Now, I haven't said to them, I'm not going to take it and say, well, we can't charge you extra. I would never do that anyway. But the point is, I think this is now the second year. And I said to them, unfortunately, this is now the second year. We will have to enter into a new agreement because our agreement was based on the fact that we should have received an insurance commission, and we're not. They said, Reena, fine, we're happy. You do a great job. Let's just enter into a new one with a higher fee if we're going to not use a broker. And so I think that's where I think managers have gone wrong. Rather than saying, I'm sorry, but our quote to you is based on us getting some sort of subsidisation through your commission. That's not happening. So we'll have to now either terminate this agreement and enter into a new one in a general meeting, explaining why. I think if agents had done that rather than using this clause that apparently was in these agreements that allowed them to do, I think that would be more transparent.
Yeah, see, I like the way that you did that. And you would have had, if you're using the standard SCA template, you would have had a clause in there that said, if our fee is quoted on the basis of receiving an insurance commission and we don't receive it, then our fee increases by the same amount.
Well, I didn't even know it was in there.
Yeah, well, there you go. You're going to just send the bill. Yeah. So, yes, and I completely take your point. This is a discussion I've been having with some strata managers that insurance commissions don't just fund the work that we do on insurance claims. But my answer is, well, therein lies the problem.
That's right.
In a climate where insurance premiums are rising,
correct,
where commissions we're seeing are rising, and we heard last year about 25, 30, 40% commissions and broker fees. These are huge numbers, and they're being used, and the money that is coming in is being used to fund services, to pay for services that are completely unrelated to insurance. And I'm told in some companies completely unrelated to the building for which the policy is being placed. A smaller building that might not have a lot of work, not a lot of insurance claims perhaps, not a lot of demand on the strata manager. There's still a big lump sum coming in, and that's subsidizing the work that strata manager does on another building. That is completely unfair, completely lacking in transparency, and it leaves strata managers in a position of having to explain themselves and explain this murky grayness that is around insurance commissions. My answer as a professional is, why put yourself in that position? Why not be absolutely upfront? This is the service I provide and this is how much it costs. Yes, there will be additional work for additional fees, and you'll have a range of rates that you might charge for that additional work that may or may not happen. But this whole question of insurance commissions,
I agree.
You're right, Reena, over the years has become more complicated. And I think because some businesses have perhaps abused that opportunity, let's call it, and certainly our insurance climate, I'm going to say, has changed significantly. So that's why we're having the conversation. That's why this new legislation is creeping along. Things could be moving a little bit faster in my point of view, but something is better than nothing. That's why I've added this one in as a win this week and make sure all of our managers are aware of it.
Yeah, I think you're right, Amanda. It's only because the insurance premiums have been rising. I mean, there was a time people don't realise that the insurance premiums were actually going down and managers' remuneration was also going down. But at that time, that wasn't really an issue because people don't think about that when things are going well. We all don't really think about it. And I totally agree. I mean, some of these premiums now, because of the fact that the buildings are aging and they're higher risk for the insurer and also the insurance market with, climate change and storms and fires as causes. But it's funny because back in 2007, I recall that I went to the SCA Principals Forum in Bali, and this was actually brought up back then about abolishing insurance commissions. And many of the businesses I was surprised at that were present at that particular conference, including larger companies, wasn't just smaller operators, said that if insurance commissions were abolished, that they would actually go broke. They would not be able to, because sometimes the insurance commission is, half the management fee or even more than the management fee for the smaller buildings and this is, again, if you don't provide service, you don't provide value, you're too scared to then up your fees. And there are also, Amanda, some demographic areas where if you try and increase your fees, then they're going to fire you. You know what I mean? I've heard that as well, where people think, well, you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing the base fees. You're not comparing the quality of the manager, the longevity of that manager, how many buildings they manage, what's the turnover of managers to buildings for our company. Like I've had the other day, someone told me they've had 4 different managers, in 2 years. So, but when you're looking at base fees, you're looking at comparing the 2 different agreements. You're just looking at the dollars. You're not looking at the quality. And that's, I think, something where the consumer has lost that because of rising costs. Where can we sort of save money? Where can we cut down? So, yeah.
Well, hadn't planned this one as a revisit on the insurance commission topic, but I really walked into that one. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, as always. It is a continuing conversation, and we'll keep our eyes on the movement of further reform through our Parliament, especially here in New South Wales. You seem to be really leading the way on this one. Thank you for taking the time to join me again this week, Reena. Enjoy the rest of your week in Strata.
Thanks, Amanda. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Your Strata Property, the podcast which consistently delivers to property owners reliable and accurate information about their strata property. You can access all the information below this episode via the show notes at yourstrataproperty.com.au.